Hi, my name is Gerjet. I am one of the founders of Skill Yoga and your skill coach. And this is...
I'm Angelle. I am one of the yoga teachers here at Skill Yoga.
And today we're here because we've received a lot of questions from your end about yoga and your yoga practice.
So question number one that we're going to answer is, I have wrist pain during and after some workouts. What should I do? And the number one thing is that this is super common in any kind of yoga practice. The wrists are often one of the first things to get injured. So Gerjet's going to talk a little bit about the movements that the wrists make.
Yeah, exactly. So to understand what causes the pain, you first need to understand that your wrist can actually move in a lot of different ways. You have a flexion and you have an extension movement and you have two abduction movements. So all of these need to work properly, and if you're stiff in one or the other way, this lack of flexibility can cause your pain. Maybe your wrists are just built in a way that you can't even stretch your hands that far without pain, or you're missing strength. Doesn't matter what it is. In general, what we really recommend all yoga students before any yoga practice is to warm up the wrists properly, which is, you can draw hand circles. We do this a lot in our yoga classes, starting our class, and tabletop, just rotating the shoulders and then stretching out the wrist before you get started. And then doing, if you've never done this, like doing some wrist pumps where you try to lift the root of the hand off the ground and bring it back down, just to warm up the muscles and stretch them and prepare them for proper yoga training.
Right. And then some important things to look for when you're in poses like down dog and plank pose is the alignment of your wrists. And I think one of the most helpful things is to see that the wrist creases, these little wrinkles here when your hands are flat on the ground, are parallel to the top of your mat. That's often a really great indication to see if your alignment is good. And when you have that, your wrist shouldn't be bothering you too much anymore.
Yeah, one more thing, if that still doesn't help, try in plank position or tabletop just to move the hands a bit further forward so you don't have as much of a bend in them. And if that still doesn't help, maybe you can try to go onto the fists or do this kind of cupcake hands where you're on your fingertips. Question number 2. What's the best way to improve my sitting forward fold?
Great question. So a lot of people experience this over-rounding in the spine when they're trying to approach seated forward folds, or they can't touch their toes all the way because there's a lack of mobility in the hips and hamstrings and also along the spinal column. So what we're looking for in a seated forward fold is to facilitate an anterior tilt of the pelvis. What happens when we're too posteriorly tilted, then there's this over-rounding in the spine and we're not able to get as far towards our feet. So Gerjet's going to offer a few examples of how you can find this anterior tilt in a seated forward fold.
Yeah, so mostly when we're sitting on a chair, what happens, we have this rounding. So we need to align our body first to come to this anterior tilt. And the first thing I always do when I enter a forward fold is press my hands to the ground, just push my hips back and then straighten the back, and then from here I lean forward. If you're still struggling, then what I would recommend you to do is keep a slight bend in the knees. That usually facilitates that, or lift your hips a little bit off the ground by putting a blanket or a pillow underneath your butt. And these usually help to bring your pelvis into the right position to reach forward. And then once you're there, really try to focus on your breath, deep in and exhales, because if you're calming your breath, you're calming your mind, and you're also calming your nervous system, and that will let your body or your muscles actually loosen up and sink deeper into the stretch.
Question number 3. I have knee pain in some poses such as pigeon, low lunge, sitting cross-legged. What can I do?
Very important question. And first of all, the most important thing in yoga is that if you're experiencing pain, don't push further, but rather back off. We don't want to work into the pain. It's not a good thing. Second of all, the knee pain in all of these poses, or a lot of these poses, is caused by a lack of mobility in the hips. So you really need to focus on the hips instead of the knee. Anatomically, the knee is only stable in a few positions. So if it's completely straight, if it's bent at 90 degrees, or completely bent. And if we're lacking mobility in the hips, then this can become problematic if we're trying to come into a lotus pose, for example. So what I really want you to do is flex the toes to protect the knee and be careful and just give yourself some time to let these hips open up. Yeah.
Right, Gerjet said it really well. For example, in pigeon pose, focusing on flexing your feet and not forcing your foot towards the top of the mat, but maybe taking a deeper angle, a deeper bend in the knee. You can also support yourself by sliding a blanket underneath your hips. That's going to take some pressure off of the knee as well. Also, stretching out the hamstrings and stretching out the IT band, the sides of the legs, is really going to help you relieve knee pain as well. Question number 4. I have always been a gym person, but I'm now looking to lose 20-ish pounds and increase my mobility and strength. Can yoga help?
Yoga can definitely help. So cardio training and nutrition are usually more effective to losing weight, but there's many reasons that you don't want to do these things. For example, if you're injured, you might not want to go out for a run because you have knee problems or whatever. You absolutely hate cardio training, or you're overweight and you're struggling to do this. So there's plenty of studies that show that yoga really can help you with long-term weight loss. It's just always a question of how fast and what goals you have. The advantage of yoga though is that it's not just helping you to lose weight, but also to strengthen your muscles and to increase your flexibility. So it's a lot more holistic than just going out for a run.
And speaking about the holistic aspect of it, yoga also helps you become much more aware of your body and thus become much more aware of what you're putting into your body, what you're choosing to eat, what decisions you're making throughout the day, such as rather biking or walking to work instead of driving, things like that.
Yeah, maybe one last note is if you're really trying to lose weight and that's your primary goal with yoga, then try to choose classes that are rather intense. So if you're doing a very slow recovery flow, that might feel good, but really doesn't help you to shed all these pounds. So you need some intensity if you want to lose weight quickly. Question number 5. I have very limited hip mobility and flexibility due to a competitive cycling background. What should I do when I can't even sit cross-legged comfortably? Angel.
So, fantastic question. A lot of athletes will experience tightness in the hips. And for example, in a cycling background, there's a lot of movements of extension and flexion in the hips, but not so much external and internal rotation. And so that serves you very well if you are trying to perform really well in a cycling competition, for example. But yoga is an incredible tool to begin checking into your body and observing your own body's limitations. So if you come from something like a competitive cycling background, I would say don't take it so hard on yourself if you're not very good at external rotation or internal rotation. Rather, take your yoga practice as a check-in to see what your limits are and to observe where you can still improve.
Yeah, and then really take your time. Especially men we have narrower hips. That means we're also, on average, less flexible in the hips, and just takes lots of time. Especially with the cross-leg pose. Start by sitting on your heels. That's what I'm always doing. And then if you're warmed up or if you feel like you're progressing, first put a blanket or a pillow underneath your seat, and then at some point you can come into this cross-leg seat or even a loaded seat. But that's going to take a long time, especially if you have tight hips from lots of sports that you did prior to yoga.
Question number 6. My back hurts from sitting at the desk all day. Is yoga good for me?
And yes, yoga is good for it. The problem is if you do yoga twice a week and then you still slouch for 8 hours every day, that's a problem. It's not going to help you that much. So you need to change, first of all, your seating posture, and second of all, you can do yoga to open up certain muscles and on the other hand strengthen certain areas to come into a good posture.
Right, and a yoga practice, number 1, helps you become more aware of your body. So like Aya was saying, if you practice twice a week, then you might go to work the next day and notice that you're slouching over, whereas before you would slouch and just not even realize it. Another thing that I hate when people say, but I'm gonna say it, motion is lotion. So any kind of movement in the body helps circulation. I hate it so much, but it helps circulation and helps increase the body fluids that are flowing around, like synovial fluid, and that helps lubricate your joints, and that's really, really helpful for any kind of back pain. Thanks for watching. I hope this video cleared up a lot of your burning questions that you have about your yoga practice. If you have any more questions for us, feel free to leave them in the comments so that we can look through them. And if there's a math, we'll make a second video to answer them for you. See you on the mat.
See you on the mat.